This is Jeff Wolf, Director of Reimbursement at Bessler, and today I'm going to show you the power of Easy Workpapers. If you're looking on screen, you can see that I am looking at General Hospital Fiscal Year 19 demo, which happens to be a 12/31/17 cost report. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new fiscal year. So I'm going to go into Manage Facilities, and I'm going to create a new fiscal year. So you see right now I'm currently looking at this 12/31/17. I'm going to click on Add New. And we're going to say another general hospital because that's the facility we're talking about. But we're now going to make it a 1/1/2018 through 12/31/2018. And you can choose either HFS or CompuMax. We support both, but I'll go ahead and choose HFS. And I'm going to call this one the As Filed Work in Process Cost Report. The last two things you need to do is decide where you're going to build from. In other words, where are you going to take all of the formats, the building blocks, the work papers, all the information as far as how to process data. In this case, I'm going to use my prior year, which if I come right here is that demo 2017, and then you have a choice on the prior year. The reason you have those two as options is once in a while you'll do an interim cost report, and that you might make some changes to the work papers or make some adjustments, and you want that incorporated going forward. So you would build from your interim, and then your prior year would still be the prior fiscal year because that's got your full year of data when you do your prior year, current year comparisons, all that kind of stuff. So in this case, and 99% of the time, these will both be the same, the demo or the build from and the prior year facility. So once I hit save, it's actually created that facility, and you can see it down here at the bottom of the list. And when I close the manage, I can now switch, because I'm still looking at my 12/31/17. I can switch over to looking at my 12/31/18 cost report. So now that I've done that, I've created the fiscal year. It's a brand new fiscal year. I have all the data files that I used in my prior year, including all of the unique setups. So the fact that I had a company ID in this particular general ledger, the fact that I have the payer code, and I'm using procedure number for one of my revenue reclasses. All of that is already built in because that's what we did in prior year. When we look at worksheet A, and I'm going to expand so we see all departments, so show all lines. And I'm just going to refresh it to clean up the column width. You can see that the groupings got copied over from last year. So all my departments, as I slide down the list, they have the groupings from prior year. And you can see that the building blocks are the same as what we used in prior year. So my worksheet A salaries is still all departments with these three ranges of sub-accounts. That's what we used last year, as well as the other expense. If you look at the source, there's the two building blocks, the one complex one and the one very simple no data one. All of that is ready to go. Things like our workspace comments, the public and the internal comments are already in here. So if you remember in an earlier video, we talked about the internal comments. When I start my cost report, I create my new fiscal year, and the first thing I do is I go to the management reports, click on internal comments, and I have a full list, just waiting for it to pop up here. I have a full list of all of the work papers and the internal comments. So all of those work papers that need special attention or that have a complicated process, or I have to remember to do this before I do that kind of a thing, all of that's listed so you know before you even start your cost report what are those complex or difficult work papers that you have to complete. All of that's done, including printed reports are ready to go. We just don't have data. You can see from my general ledger here or from my worksheet A, I don't have any data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load in my general ledger. And here I'm just going to select from my wizard an input file, and I'm just going to go down. You can go to any drive on your network. In this case, I'm going to go deep into my computer, into my demonstration. Oops. And I'm going to pull the GL. Now, one of the things you'll note is that we have, what do we do with new accounts and new sub-accounts, or new departments and new sub-accounts? I personally prefer the insert into the chart of accounts. It keeps my data complete, and it allows us to manage the descriptions and identify new accounts, sub-accounts really easily. There's options. You can reject the new items into an error file, so you can analyze those in Excel and then load them in. Or you can say, during the import process, stop the process of import while I decide what to do with those accounts and sub-accounts. My favorite is using the insert. It keeps data complete and it doesn't stop the import process. It's just one item at a, or I deal with one item at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and import, and you can see you get a preview of the data file. And in this case, I'm going to click on the first column and say that happens to be my account number. The second column happens to be my sub-account. Third column happens to be my dollar value. And you'll notice that if it says click to map and you don't map it, it won't be imported. So if you have a volume report or a payroll file, and the payroll file usually has employee names or social numbers or something like that, if you don't need that data, you don't click and map it, it will not be loaded to our website. So that data would actually stay behind your firewall. So you can either leave something that you don't want imported to click to map, or you can click on the ignore and it will ignore that column. In this case, I do need that column. It's my co-ID. And then lastly, you notice as you click on a column and identify what it is, it becomes used, so you can't say that the same thing is in two different columns. And then I'm going to hit continue. So once I hit continue, it's actually loading the data up to the website, processing it, and putting in and filling in all of the work papers, in this case, based on the general ledger. So all of these building blocks are being completed, the work papers are being filled in, and now I am ready to look at it. Anytime you import data, you have an error log. If you click on the error log, it will show you in Excel. And just gotta wait for my Excel to open up. It'll show you in Excel that, hey, you had an error in line 1. The error was, it was an invalid field for the account number. Well, that's because that was my header record. So you're allowed to leave your header records when you import data. It's actually nice. There's nothing worse than having 27 columns of nothing but numbers and trying to remember which column is a department, which one's the sub-account, which one's the dollars versus hours, that kind of thing. So leaving the header records in is just fine. We'll kick those out as errors, but it will tell you which row the error is on. So if you see multiple errors, you know where in your raw file to go and look at to fix. You can always export the data that you imported to Excel just as a verification, or you can click on the view data, and view data just basically shows you this is what we loaded up. As I said before, by inserting the chart of accounts with question marks for the descriptions for new items, if I now go to my chart of accounts and I sort based on the description, at the top of the list, 3 with question marks, those are new general ledger departments. So I can copy those, put them out in Excel. Just got to wait for my Excel to open up. And then I can rename them. You know, VLOOKUP to get the description from your general ledger or whatever. But there, that quickly, once I've got them VLOOKUP, I've got, whoops, undo that. Let's copy instead of paste. I can copy that, and I can paste it back into Easy Workpapers, and I've got an updated list. I can then attach a copy of that document, that Excel file. So in this case, I've got that Excel file all the way back at my temp drive. And I called it New Departments. And so now, if I want to see what those new departments were in this year, all I do is click on that attached file, and I see the names of the departments listed there. So very, very quick and easy to update, and you have a permanent record of what the new accounts, and the same thing for the sub-accounts. You can do the same thing, so double-clicking on the chart of sub-accounts, sorting by the description, and then here are the new sub-accounts. I could again copy them out, VLOOKUP, paste, and then I would attach the new sub-account list. So very easy to do. Once you know what your new departments are, you can come down and you start looking at data. So I'm now going to say I only want to show lines that have data. So I'm going to hide all the blank lines. And so here you see my worksheet A is already filled in. Remember, The source of that column for the salaries column shows me the building block. So based on those sub-accounts, that's my salaries. It's actually very easy to update. You have a list of new sub-accounts. So these are the sub-accounts that we used in prior year. So unless we had a change, these should be the same sub-accounts we use for salaries for this year. But I have a list of new sub-accounts, maybe 10 or 12 of them. I can look at that list. I usually print it out and I have it on my desk as I'm working on the cost report. I can look at that list and I can say, here's a new sub-account for salaries. Is it in one of these ranges? If it is, it's already being captured. If it's not, then I can edit the building block and I can add it. And in this case, I can either add an extra range just by typing in here, or I'm going to supersize this, or if I don't know the description, I can come down and say, oh, this one through this one. That's how easy I can add a range. I can add distinct items either by typing it in, or again, I can scroll down and say, nope, that one and that one and that one. So very easy to hit save. It's updated. And what you'll see is that the computer went and updated the description or the mathematics for it. And once I close that, you notice now my definition has been changed here on this one. Now I'm going to change it back just so that we don't have some weird numbers in the ranges. But that's actually very easy for me to do. I'm just going to delete what I added, close the parentheses. Don't need to close the parentheses. There we go. And it's back to where it was. So very easy to do, and then it refreshes the page. So whether it's worksheet A, your printed reports, by the way, are now here, already updated with the groupings because we're using last year's groupings. Remember what I talked about when we talked about definition of workspaces? If it was grouped in 53 last year, it's automatically grouped that way this year, but it is a white column, which means you can edit it. You could change the grouping and make that cost report line number 1. And now when we look at our printed report, you'll see there's anesthesia in cost report line 1. So very easy to update. Any changes you make in this fiscal year do not affect prior years, but they move this year and forward, because when we create next year, the 2019 report, it'll be based on the 2018. So the system evolves with your usage. If we talk about A6s, you know, one of those things we talked about, the 80%, the same, that 80% of the cost report that we're trying to process as fast as possible because it's the same analysis with the same data elements. We just need to double check, are there any new items? Again, equipment rent is one of those. We can look at the source. We can say there's 4 sub-accounts right now that are the sub-accounts for equipment rent. I can look at my list of new sub-accounts. If there's one on there, is it in the list? If the answer is yes, great. If the answer is no, I can edit the building block and change it and add it. Once I've done that, I'm ready to go. The increase side of the equation is already done for you. It's an if statement. It's saying if it's cost report line number 2, put the sum of equipment rent there. Otherwise, we don't do anything. So that's the increase side of the equation. And the decrease side, if you remember when we talked about this earlier, the formula is -1 times the building rent, or the equipment rent. So it backs it out of wherever it was booked by accounting. So this is a natural reclass that if the total dollars are consistent with prior year, we're using last year's as the baseline for the sub-accounts. This should be good to go unless I have a new sub-account for equipment rent. So that easily you can go through. If we talk about our A8s and revenue offsets, cafeteria revenue is a great example. It's already captured the cafeteria revenue. Again, if you look at the source, we're saying every department, and we have a small range of sub-accounts that are our cafeteria revenue. It's already being captured wherever it was booked by accounting. And in this case, this year, you notice they had $1,300 in continuing education, but the rest of it is in nutrition. So we captured both of those and moved them to the cafeteria line so that we offset that against the cafeteria cost report line. You know, if we look at miscellaneous other operating revenue, same thing. We picked up all of the miscellaneous operating revenue. Every department, there's a litany list of sub-accounts, makes these numbers up, but we also have a column that says don't offset against non-reimbursable cost report lines, and so zero those out, and then here's our total adjustment. So all of that's ready to go. The printed reports are ready to go. So remember we talked about that 80% of the cost report that is the same analysis, same data elements that we were doing last year as well as this year. We need to have those ready to go as quick as possible. That's what Easy Workpapers is going to get you through. And we've been talking now for about 10 minutes, and in that quick amount of time, I've loaded the general ledger only, and I'm able to look at A's, A6s, A8s. I could look at C, except that I need the revenue and usage file to make a lot of those revenue reclasses. Things like my trial balance recon are done. My cost report to income statement recon are done. All of those things are already populated and ready for you to review. And if you need to make adjustment, changing those building blocks are very easy to do. This has been Jeff Wolf, and we've been talking about the power of Easy Workpapers.